Hi, welcome, Wander family, and welcome to another episode of the WandrFul podcast. Today we have an amazing guest with us, Ed Orozco. Ed's been designing for the last 10 years, and he is a top medium writer on the topic of design and design thinking. His articles have been read by thousands of people every single month. Have Ed on our show because he has been one of the first employees at WandrFul and has helped us grow from one employee and three-digit contracts to 20 plus employees and six-figure contracts in a short sprint of 2 years. And in early 2021, he has launched his own podcast called Growing Design, where he interviews industry leaders on how to run effective design organizations. So super excited. Ed, welcome to the show.
I'm super excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. So, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So with every interview, we always start with a rapid fire round. So Ed, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. So where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Colombia, and I lived there until I was 22, 23 years old.
Awesome. And where are you now?
I'm in a little town in France, very close to Switzerland, called Ferney-Voltaire.
Like a true Wanderito, starting out in Colombia, now living in France. And what is a book that you think everyone should read? And I know you're a big bookworm, so give us something good.
It's really hard to like pick just one. I think it depends on like in which area, but I think like in general, everyone should read How to Make Friends and Influence People, I think is the name, by Dale Carnegie. I think it's a fantastic book. It's a small book. You can read it very quickly, and it's like it changes the way you see interpersonal relationships. It's really good.
Have you felt like you've been influencing people and making new friends since that book?
It's funny. I think that the name is not that great, to be honest, for like compared to the content of the book. It's not about like manipulation or like persuasion. It's about just knowing how to deal with people, just like learning how to deal with people. I think the name might like give the wrong impression about what the book is actually about.
What is one app that you cannot live without?
Oh man. So for sure I cannot live without one password. um Literally every time I get a new device, that's the first one, the first app that I'll install. But once that one is installed, then I cannot live without Apple Notes. That's just, that's my second brain, sort of.
Yeah, every time like I'm always the person who types in the password, gets it wrong, types in the password, gets it wrong, and then it's like I want to change the password, and then it says when you're changing it, it's like, oh, you cannot use your previously used password. It's like, but that's what I've been typing for the last 5 times.
Yeah, passwords are broken.
Yeah. What do you think is the best invention of all time?
Wow, the best invention, the internet, for sure. um yeah, it's just great. Like it's yeah, I mean, we can talk for hours about the internet, and it's like we take it for granted, but like it's literally the single most impactful invention I can think of.
All right. So another vote for the internet. I think we've been getting the internet is like the most common response we've been getting on the podcast. I think the other one was like Google Maps or Fire or something like that. I can't recall. What's your favorite accomplishment? What's your all-time favorite accomplishment?
It's gonna sound really cheesy, but like getting married for me was quite an accomplishment. I think it's very important for everyone to have like, I mean, it's not for everyone, but I think it's very important for you to have a person or a few people that you can like, talk to and like, you know flesh out your ideas with, and like be the first filter of your ideas. I think that's super super important. Whether that's like a family member or
Really?
siblings or whatever, I think is it makes a big impact in your life.
All right. That is a pretty big accomplishment. Most people don't end up meeting their, life partner. So congratulations. I know you're still a newlywed.
Thank you.
So that is a great accomplishment. And what's the biggest challenge that you're working on now?
There's a few. I don't know which one's the biggest. Uh, my biggest challenge right now is we want to buy a car, and we want to buy like the right car. And I've
Yeah.
never bought a car in my life, so I'm totally lost. I'm like asking friends, reading online, like what to look for, and like what is the right answer. So that's a fun challenge that I'm going through right now.
That's a different challenge. When I asked that last question to every guest that I've had on this show so far, they're usually telling me what's keeping them up at night, and it's work related. So it's a nice breath of fresh air to hear that your challenge that you're working on is something a little bit more personal, like buying your first car.
Yeah, you can always be stressed about work. That's I think everyone is to a certain degree a little stressed about work. But
Yeah.
there's other things that also deserve your creative energy.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get started. And I want to use that as a leadway to our first question. You mentioned, creative energy. Like what's right now taking up that creative space for you?
I'm trying to write more. As you know, I really enjoy writing. Um, and I think the biggest hurdle for me building up the discipline to do it consistently. Yeah, well, that could be another challenge. That's a constant struggle, like to find time to write and to find the right time, which I think is just as important because for example, you probably, yeah, as you'll remember, I'm a morning person. I'm at my best as soon as I wake up. Like my brain is like, firing with ideas, and like it's when I'm most creative. And in the evening, I'm like I'm totally like distracted or tired, or I don't feel like using computers. I'm tired of looking at the screen after I don't know how many hours.
But that's a good thing. I mean, I'm the complete opposite. As soon as things wind down, it's like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. That's when my brain just like turns on. It's like, bing, all right, let's get to work. And I'm like, I'm tired. I just want to go to sleep. But then my brain refuses to shut down. But I'm curious, like, do you actually get a chance to write in the morning? And like, what do you typically write about? Like, I know on Medium, there's a lot of articles about design process. Is that what you're still passionate about writing?
Yeah, I think writing about design processes comes naturally for me because for whatever reason, I'm fascinated with how computers make us more productive. And that probably sounds like a cliche, like everyone's going to tell you that computers make people more productive. But I always get always surprised to see that for something that we rely on so heavily in our lives, the level of computer mastery for most people is quite low. For example, um, we all regardless of what we do, if we work on a computer, we have to edit text, and there's not a lot of people who use like clipboard managers or
Mm.
text editors. And that to me, that it's something that I use every day, and I'm surprised to see like most people don't do that, or like text expanders or shortcuts or things like that. So because I'm so like into that kind of thing, I don't know if you know different things fascinate different people. For me, it is how to make better use of the machine to like get there faster or do it better. So taking that fascination with productivity and mixing it with my other sort of passion, which is design, like naturally brings or like generates this like interest in design productivity, and how can we help designers make the best out of um, the tools that they work with, and the type of work that they do, and like the processes they follow, and how they think about problems, and how they collaborate and work with other designers and with their managers and with their reports. So yeah, for me it comes natural to think about those topics. So going back to your question, and that's really what I feel like writing um, the most about. I don't always write about these topics, but I would say that's like the central um, core of my writing.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Ed is a true techie. Like he will, if he learns a new software, he's gonna know everything about how to use that software and all of its shortcuts. I was quite impressed by how much knowledge he's able to consume about what he uses, and then the process of making that tool make you more productive, as he said. Let's talk a little bit more about design productivity. You write a lot about design process. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your optimal process is when it comes to designing for a company or a product?
I think processes are always changing depending on the people, the size, and the skills, and how and your interaction with stakeholders. The optimal process is the one that creates alignment um, in the organization and allows you to satisfy the common goal for that organization. So those are the main two things that I think a good design process needs to do. First, create alignment. Second, be really good at delivering under the premise of that of the agreed goal.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that statement as well. But a lot of times when you're a designer, especially a new designer at a much larger organization, how do you even impact like the alignment of different stakeholders and what their goals are? Because a lot of times those goals and alignment are just being trickled down from the leadership team, right? So yeah, as a designer, how do you make sure that you have that right information, that you are being aligned to the goals of the company?
Yeah, unfortunately, the lower you are in the hierarchy, the more difficult it is to have a say in the process. But what you can do is, if there is no process, pay attention to the feedback that you get from your peers and your superiors during design critiques and design reviews. Take that into consideration for the next iterations or every time you start a new project. You'll quickly learn after a few sessions that they always focus on the few on just a set of things that are really important for the organization, and that's going to help you produce work that's going to be more aligned with what they are looking for. Constant work in progress. You're always looking at the process and trying to make it better. And when new people join the company, they always bring like new ideas and new ways of doing things. So be open to what new hires have to bring and incorporate that. I mean, if you're like a leader trying to establish or improve a design process.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really nice, right? Like you would expect the design leads or leadership in an organization to be working on the process, the design process, the design operations, and helping to onboard more junior designers into that process. But a lot of times we both know that that's not what's really happening in these organizations, right? There's a lot of chaos. I feel that design is like relatively a new department in a lot of companies. So, what's your advice for these junior designers who are coming on board? They got so much excitement to contribute to these large companies, and then they get there and they're just kind of completely taken aback by the disorganization of the design processes.
First of all, know that that is the norm. You're going to find more companies that operate in that way than really organized companies. So you know, be open to that, accept the chaos, but always keep your eye open um, for new, better ways of doing things. The cool thing, or at least one of the advantages of the lack of organization, is that that also means that you're going to have less hurdles when it comes to optimization and improving processes. They're going to be more receptive if you find a new way of doing something that saves everyone time. um, it's going to be easy for them to adopt it. So always keep looking for ways of doing things better, and try to communicate them with, like, share them with the team, share them with your superiors. um, people are usually pretty receptive to ideas that will save them time.
Let's transition over to how you can adapt design operations to a company, because you have a pretty wide range of experiences. Like, you've worked with WandrFul, where you were part of our leadership team. You've helped create and implement our design process. You've also worked at a startup with less than 20 people. You're now at an enormous organization that's growing at a very, very fast pace speed. How has design operations been different for all of these organizations that you've worked at? And how do you adapt to the different design ops for each of these organizations?
um, I don't think there's a huge difference in terms of principles. You're still looking at generating alignment and hitting the target more quickly, and hopefully with very high standards of quality. What changes are like the tactics, the more specifics. So, for example, the more people you have, usually the more steps in the process, the more structure um, that you're going to require. So, I would say the principles that we mentioned before still apply to all sizes of companies. So you have still to generate alignment between still stakeholders and leadership and production, um, and you need to find the best way to deliver what's required for the goal that everyone aligned towards. What changes between small and bigger companies is the tactics, or the more specific things, such as um, steps in the process, revisions, the specifics of um, who's involved in each stage of review or critique, um, and then how many people are involved in that process, how many people are going to work together in a team. So I think those are the things that change. So you have to go, a little further when it's a bigger company, to like also try to mediate or to um, plan for those cases. In a smaller company, you have a lot more flexibility. It's easier to communicate with everyone, so you don't need as much rigidity in the process, as much structure. But ultimately, you're still doing the same two things. You're generating alignment, and you're aiming for efficiency.
Gotcha. And what about, let's move into where you're at in your career now. You're very much focused on fintech. Have the processes been different when you're designing for fintech?
The design process is about the same in all of the different industries that I've had the opportunity to work with. Fintech has the particularity, you have to be very careful um, with the work, because your work all of a sudden has to comply with a lot of regulations, especially if you work at a regulated company, to prevent fraud, to prevent crime, to prevent so many things. The minute you start working with money and people's monies and assets, things become a lot more. I wouldn't say tricky, but you have to be a lot more careful, and that means that you're going to have to generate alignment between more, like, more groups of stakeholders. You have also like legal. You have like, yeah. So that's something that I've noticed in fintech is like no one has sort of like the power to like call all the shots. You rely a lot more on like different departments that have different specialties. So that puts a bit more of importance in the alignment part of the design process, in which you have to make sure that you're communicating with all of these parties. You have to make sure that you're like catering to their interest as well, because like usually for designers is like you just need buy-in from you just need approval from developers that this can be built, and approval from leadership that this is what the business wants. But in fintech you also have to make sure that this is going to be compliant with the regulations, and this is going to be like we can say this, and that this is going to be legal, and this is going to like protect or put the user's interest under protection and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you're adding a lot more extra layers into that design process. What are some of the regulations? Or like what's a regulation that really surprised you in designing for fintech?
Well, there's many. There's a lot about security. You have to be very careful about security because the internet can be a dark place, and there's no shortage of hackers and scammers and people who want to steal people's money and want to run all sorts of schemes. So you wouldn't believe the amount of um, corner cases that you have to plan for to mitigate as much as possible potential security uh, concerns and vulnerabilities. That is a huge thing. And I would say another thing is you have to be careful about what you say. You have to be very specific and careful about the language that you use, because you cannot offer things that can be misinterpreted by customers, because you can get sued, or you can get a huge fine from the regulators. So those two things, there's a lot more, but for me, those are the two that have like caused the biggest impact, or like the biggest surprise is like the amount of care that you have to put into the designs now is, like now it gets real. Like this can have serious consequences if you don't do it right.
Right. I mean, it's concerning people's money, right? So you want to make sure that you're building that trust and security and using the right language to make sure that everyone understands uh, like what your product does and how it can benefit your users and how they can feel safe using your product. So, how talk to me a little bit more about that communication when it comes to incorporating incorporating language into design? Because a lot of times designers don't really think about that. They're just thinking about, oh, how do I get user X to do X Y Z, right? Um, but in your case, as a designer, you have so many elements to think about. You have the regulations, you have multiple stakeholders to align, and then on top of that, you also have communication. So, how do you design for all of that? What is like? Be a little bit more specific about your design process.
Yeah, it's not easy, and I don't think there's like a silver bullet for like doing it right. Um, you just have to like put as many filters as you can before releasing stuff, and to make sure that everyone that can have a say about something that's about to be released will have the opportunity to provide ideas and feedback. Um, Whether you do that in like sessions with many people, whether you do that through workshops, or whether you do that with individual sessions, is up to you and the organization. But you have to make sure that everyone is heard, because otherwise you're going to go really far in the project. Designers and developers and leadership will approve, and then all of a sudden you have the legal department saying, we cannot do this because this and this regulation. And another thing that maybe I forgot to mention, also another huge challenge that you have to like take into consideration with, especially in fintech, is the scale. because as we know, and this is something that we talk about a lot. I remember with our clients at Wander, scale just like is a multiplier by definition of your reach. So whatever type of scam that can be pulled off with a traditional bank can be like done much faster and a much bigger scale if that institution operates online, because all of a sudden you have like the you can run the scan with robots, you can automate your scam and make it a huge deal. Sometimes you have to move slow to move faster. um, if you do it right, you're going to have less revisions, right? So if you do it right, you have less revisions, less hurdles. You'll have less things to change, so you can actually ship faster and more frequently than if you're like ignoring people's interest and you're just doing your thing. Then you're gonna have feedback, and then you have to go back to the drawing board, because sometimes the type of feedback goes back to like product strategy and like the actual principles in which you were basing your initiative or idea or project, and you have to literally go back to the drawing board and start over. And then you just wasted a bunch of weeks working on something that was never going to see the light of the day.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there was something that you also mentioned when you and I were chatting a few weeks ago about designing for fintech. Like, what are some of the key elements? I mean, you've mentioned security and, again, alignment with your stakeholders, but what are some other key things for designers to keep in mind when they're designing for fintech?
um, Clarity is paramount. um, I know clarity is something that you have to keep in mind in when you're designing, but when you're talking about people's monies and people's assets, you have to be extra cautious about making sure that everything is understandable, that people are getting what you're trying to say, even if you're not writing the copy, but like in the design, in the layout, in the information architecture, in the way that you sequence the steps in an experience. You have to be super clear so that people have trust in you. If they need their money, they're going to be able to get it. If they need to send money, they're going to be able to do it. If they need like a statement, they're going to be able to get it. So they need to have that feeling of almost like certainty that your product is going to work. A lot of that has to do, no surprises, with know your customer, knowing who your customer is, knowing the type of audience that you're going for. It gets a little more fussy when you're designing at scale for these products, because all of a sudden your audience is very, it could be anyone. So you have to rely heavily on heuristics, which are the principles that we use for UX audits and for evaluating the quality of an experience. There are timeless, time tested uh, principles for designing that can help you determine if an interface or if a product is gonna be good. Things like cognitive overload, things about progressive disclosure, things like the number of elements that you put on the screen, the order of things. Don't surprise the user. Like don't give them something they're not expecting, and also set the right expectations when you're in the middle of a process. Tell them exactly what's going to happen, and then do exactly that. Which sounds obvious, but um, that is the way you do it.
But how do you design that? It's easy to say or tell a designer, like, oh, you're designing for clarity. But how do you actually put that into practice? How do you design clarity for your users?
Yeah, part of generating trust with your customer is the sense of speed and the sense of efficiency. And by that I mean, sometimes there are like natural speed limits or like fixed speed limits to certain transactions and certain operations that are that you cannot really modify. Like they don't really depend on you. Like you can have all the budget and all the technology in the world, and these are just like, financial infrastructure of like how the world operates that you're not going to be able to modify. But what you can do is set the right expectation for the user, under promise and over deliver, and always try to and there's also like a few design tricks that you can use in order to create the illusion that things are moving really, that things work great, and then things usually take less than you expect them to. Yeah, for example, there's this really nice uh, product called Wise, that allows you to send money around that's really what they do, like allows you to send money from one place to the other. Now they're doing other financial services and stuff, but that was really like their main value prop when they started out. And they have this nice animation where like when they're sending money, um, they have like these three parties, so like the sender and the recipient, and in the middle it's them as the middleman. And the animation when you're sending money is like it shows like a beam of light or a beam of money, I guess, that then hits them, and then they're telling you what's happening, like, oh, we charged your bank account, now we're taking your money, and now we're sending the money to your sender, and there it is, the money's there for them to use it, something like that. The funny thing about that is that the transaction happens in seconds, like in the backstage. Those processes, they're using a protocol that allows them to send money instantly, and all of this is just theatrics. It's just literally for delighting users and making them think that these things are actually happening, but it's really just a video. Like the speed is not going to change. It's not like connected to like um, the the Swift network, and then it gives you like a, at least I don't think so. I really don't think so. Maybe someone from Wise is listening to this and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, it is 100% like that." But it doesn't give me that. I don't feel like it is, because you will usually receive the notification. Like if you're sending like from one of your accounts to another account that you also have access to, you can look at the animation on the screen, and you'll receive the notification from from the recipient bank on your phone before the animation stops playing. So so that's why I think, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I love it. I know exactly what you're talking about. I think it's super clever because as a user, you see that and it's like, oh, from one person, and then you follow that little lightning rod or whatever the illustration, and it goes into the central, which is the platform, and then it goes to the wire. I think it's a really smart idea, and I totally understand what you mean by designing for speed because they could have just put a loading icon in there and it would have been the same, but as a user, like you buy into that. You're like, oh, that's really cool, like this is like real technology. But it's really there's nothing super amazing about the technology that they've created. It's just it's a great user experience. That's all it is. Don't you think? I don't know.
Yeah, something that comes up a lot in my mentorship sessions is a lot of the designers that I mentor already are in the industry. They have either junior positions or they're very close to getting their first design job. And one thing that I always sort of like um, try to like make them pay attention to is, how is your craft gonna impact the business? What I mean by that is, if you manage to go through the recruitment process and they offer you a job as a designer, whatever position it is like it is a given that you know how to design. Like we just expect you to know how to design. That's just the reality of it. But what we now want to know, or what it would be really great for you to bring into the table, is a connection between how is your craft going to impact the business. Like, because if you think about it, hiring designers is an investment for the business, as it is hiring for any other position. Businesses hire people so that they can grow and they can do stuff that they don't know or they don't have the capacity to do before hiring them, before they join. So they spend a lot of money recruiting, they spend a lot of money onboarding, and getting them on board, and also paying taxes and all of that. So it is an investment, and you have to think about it in that way. They are investing in what you know to do, so you need to find a way to communicate what how is it that your craft helps the business make more money or grow, or like gets them closer to their mission and their why, or whatever the, the business is trying to do. That for me is the number one thing. So a very simple thing to focus on is, I always think you probably know the pirate framework. I don't know if that's the actual name, but the R. So it's acquisition, adoption, retention, referral, revenue. I think it is. That is in a nutshell a business. Like that's the engine of growth of a business. So how can you as a designer connect to each one of the letters in that acronym? How can you help them acquire more customers? Also, it will depend on your skill set and the position that they hire you for, but always keep thinking about that. It is part of this funnel, it is part of this chain, and this is like literally the blood of the business. This is like what keeps them paying the bills and growing. So focus on that. Spend some time. Every minute that you spend learning about how design can impact the business is going to be a minute well spent.
Yeah, of course. And that goes across every industry, right? It's not even about designing for fintech. It's just basic good user experience that you can show an element of speed, or you can build an element of trust, that your product is actually doing more for the user than it actually might be doing, like the example that you shared with us. So moving forward, because we're coming up on time, I know you do a lot of mentorship as well. You're working with several junior designers, and you're doing what, weekly calls with them just to do some mentorship, which I think is amazing. I think the best way for anyone to hone in on their skills more is to teach everyone, or teach others what they've learned. So from this experience, what's the best advice that you're giving to these junior designers, or what is the best advice that you would give a junior designer?
Yeah, this is why I love the pirate metrics so much, because it's such a simple, condensed way for you to grasp um, the main activities or the main areas of a business. Um, all businesses literally work on these five letters. So I would advise young designers to just start there. Just literally Google the pirate framework, and learn about the meaning of these five words. And if you can find examples of all of them, they're all there's a lot written online about this, a Medium and different blogs. So I would start there. There's also some books that you can read to help you accelerate your learning. There is Creative Strategy and the Business of Design by I think Douglas Davis. I'm sorry if I'm not, if I don't remember the name of the author correctly, but that's sort of that's the name of the book. um there's a few others, but yeah, try to, you don't need to get an MBA, by all means. That's why they have like people in suits doing whatever people in suits do. But have like a like a very high level understanding of how a business works and how they make money. There's a few metrics also that are very important to keep in mind. Things like churn. um, we also had in the news recently that uh, Netflix stock plummeted because they all of a sudden reported that they're going through a lot of churn. So understand, churn is basically, first you have customers and then you don't, and then if you don't have customers, there's less money. So churn, the lower the churn, the better. And why do people churn? Many reasons, but a lot of them have to do with how satisfied they are with the product. So there it is. Like the user experience has a huge impact in how much, well, in the case of Netflix is content, but that's also part of the experience. But the if users really love the product, they're gonna have a hard time canceling their subscriptions. um, yeah, learn about referrals. Is virality, the K, I think it's called the K factor, which is like how many customers is one customer going to bring to the business or refer. Think about it like, the COVID coefficient, like how many COVID cases are gonna like infect more people.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think that's such a great advice. Like I've come across so many designers who, they have starry eyes and they want to create and they want to design these beautiful products, and they often forget like why they're even building this product in the first place, right? At the end of the day, you're building this product because this company is making money. There's stakeholders, there are investors, there are customers. It's not about what's the most beautiful creative solution you can build. It's about how can you use your skill sets to make a meaningful product that impacts a business. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think it's a nice reminder, a reminder and also a first time advice to young designers that you have to always keep in mind about how is this going to help acquire more customers, how is it going to help retain more customers, how is it going to help generate revenue and all of that. Yeah, I honestly, I wish there was a resource that can like teach designers all of these like business terms. I mean, I certainly, when I started designing, there wasn't any resources. I don't really see that much resources, business resources for designers out there even now. That would be a really great business opportunity right there if there are anyone that's listening. um I mean, my advice, I guess, to add to that is for designers to like search for that. Like go to YouTube, go to Medium and find it, because there are a lot of information out there spread out. Obviously, it's hard because there's not a single condensed resource for all of this, but you know, read as much as possible, see what's out there. But I do appreciate you bringing up that designers need to learn more about business. Um, we're about to wrap up. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think it's also very important for designers to ask more of the leadership team and their superiors. Um, this is something that I've noticed mentoring young designers, which is a lot of them unfortunately don't have great mentors or team leads or leaders or managers. So I think unfortunately it comes down to the designer asking more of them, ask for feedback, ask how can you improve, ask what is it that you're not doing so well that you can, and then go and improve on it, like take that feedback. Feedback is one of the most important things in for a designer. Design doesn't exist in a vacuum, so you need feedback from customers, but you also need a lot of feedback from your peers and your superiors. So don't be afraid to ask for feedback, to have one-on-one sessions with your mentors, with your superiors, with your managers, and learn, become a sponge, and learn. Like it's like the more you learn, the better off you'll be.
I think that's a really great advice. And if somebody wants to learn from you and have you as their design mentor, how can they reach you, or where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, you can type my name on Google, and I think ADP List is the platform that I use for mentoring. So they have really good SEO. So if you type ADP List and my name, my profile should come up right away. Um, it's really easy to connect with me on my website. So again, type my name, and on my website edorozco.com, there's a contact page, and there you have like a bunch of ways of contacting me. There's my email. There's Twitter. I don't go too much on Twitter, to be honest. But if you send me an email, I'll try to respond. I try to respond to all of my messages. And I sometimes engage in some really interesting conversations with total strangers that just decided to send me a message. So yeah, I'll definitely read the message and try to respond.